What's going on? This is Edith OtraVez, bringing you another episode of the Floro Podcast. My co-host today is Not-My-Cousin Dan, and we have a very special guest today from the podcast known as Parental Advisory with Lia Berman. We have the very funny, very fantastic comedian, Lia Berman. The topic for today's show will be very special episodes. As always, head on over to thefloralpodcast.com so you can see all our content and shop at our store. You get yourself a nice mug, maybe a throw pillow, and support the podcast at the same time. When you get a chance, make sure you go find us on Instagram as The Floral. It was really good to talk to people who are just so smart, so well-spoken. Not my cousin Dan, he's always smart, of course. But it was really good to talk to Lia Berman and kind of see her insights. And Lia Berman has an education on this very subject, so it was really kind of enlightening. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you guys do too. And so here's the show. All right, welcome to another episode of the Floro Podcast. This is Edgar OtraVez with my co-host, Not-My-Cousin Dan, and our very special guest, the fantastic comedian, Lia Berman, who is also the host of her own podcast, Parental Advisory, with Lia Berman. Hello, Lia. How you doing?
Hello. I'm good. I'm doing okay.
Thank you for joining us on a very special episode about very special episodes.
Thank you for having me, because I always feel like I have people on my podcast and they're like, we'll have you on our podcast, and then they don't put me on their podcast. I have a very special visitor with me today. This is my very special son, Jackson.
Well, hello, Jackson.
Hey, Jackson.
Hangs out with me when I'm doing a podcast.
There you go.
Outstanding.
And Edgar.
How's it going?
You want to tell them what you're doing?
For the middle part of the day, since I have to be in the race, one car with number 20 car, he hit the other car, and he is number one. Then he started the beat Lightning McQueen before Chick Hicks beat in number 20.
And that's how you have it.
There you go.
That's the way it's done.
Yeah.
Chick Hicks before he started to beat number one.
And you really love cars, right?
Yes.
You love cars. You love talking about cars.
And then one.
All right. Thanks for the update.
What an attention to detail. What a
Serious.
smart young man. Yeah. Like, look at all that. He like remembered who went first and all that stuff.
I don't think I ever got that detailed in Imagination Land, ever.
Got cars, talking about cars, any kind of car, how fast cars go. And this is not something that I put on him at all. Like, he just got really into cars.
That's because he's a little dude.
Yeah.
He's got testosterone in that body. So
I mean, but some kids are really into sports, and he's into all sorts of different things.
yeah.
Cars, man. Unbelievable. It's really, because I don't know anything about cars. Nothing.
So
I'm
like
learning along with him.
Like with your kids, guys, how much time do you spend where they'll about the things that they're interested in, they will just and how much of your life do you spend doing exactly this? Oh, really? Well, that sounds amazing.
So I didn't know that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, when I tell you I could care,
Well, for now you are. Give it another couple of years.
I could care less.
I try real hard to be interested, but I understand what you're saying. You just sometimes you just can't.
Oh, my boy, his reason for existing, his raison d'etre is video games. Always. Always. I mean, there have been other things. He went through certain phases, but this common thread of video games. And like, I used to be really into video games. At one point I wrote for a video game magazine. And then at some point it's like I woke up one morning and I was just like, I do not care anymore.
Yeah.
And then the boy came along and the boy got really interested in video games. And God help me, I tried, because it used to be something that I loved, you know. I tried so hard to actually be interested in it because I don't want to be fake for the boy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can't, help me, I can't do it. There is not, I don't know what's wrong with me. Or if I'm just an old man, but there's not a video game that I can play for more than like 20 minutes without being bored out of my skull.
I have not played a video game in 20-something years.
Oh, wow. I think I played a video game like 3 days ago.
I actually have a theory that you're either with a video game guy or a not video game guy. Not video game guy. And just by I don't care. You just are or you're not.
Yeah, I don't think there's any middle ground.
There is no middle ground.
There doesn't seem to be. In my experience, there's no middle ground. It's either you're so into it that your life revolves around it, or you couldn't care less. But there's nobody.
My girlfriends that are married to video game guys, they're like, oh, it's video games. And I'm like,
see, I try my best not to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy who's like, hold on. I'll throw out the trash. I'm playing this video game and I'm passing this level. I don't want to be that guy. So I haven't played games like that in a long time. But actually I try to stay on the games that I know that I can leave. I'm not getting immersed in one of these.
Right.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
This is going to ruin my marriage. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, there are games, and actually games that I used to love. There's a game called Katamari Damashi. I don't know if you are familiar with this or not, but it's a very Japanese game. And the whole point of the game is you roll around you start off and you're like little teeny tiny guy and you roll around this little sticky ball and you're rolling around the room and you have a goal. You have to get enough stuff to stick to the sticky ball until it's a certain size, right? That's the whole game. But you get to the end of the game. I mean, there's a level, the last level takes half an hour. And if you screw it up, if you don't get it big enough within the half an hour time limit, you just got to keep doing it again, half an hour at a time. And I can't do it. I can't do that. Like I beat the game, but it's like, I can't, I'm sorry. I'm not going to get into a level that I know I'm going to have to make a half an hour time commitment or I have to start it all over again. I'm not doing that anymore.
To me, I don't mean to be that person, but it does sound like a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean that's a half an hour more off of my ever increasingly short lifespan.
Also, I just got this. I mean, it's not the same, but like I just got a half hour like deep tissue cupping thing, and that was like a half hour, and that's all I could spare.
Yeah, right.
Add a half hour.
Right. Well, I mean, you have kids. I mean, you can't.
My point, like, And even when your kids are older, like you get your time back.
Yeah. There's very little that I do anymore.
Yes.
That it does not provide value. It's like I consider my time to be the most valuable thing. Money is great. You know, I like money, but the most valuable thing that I have that I will never be able to get again is time. And so when it's like, well, you really got to put like 4 hours at a row into a game. It's like, oh, well, that's a game I'm not playing.
Exactly.
You know, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
It's hard too with like things you watch, like their commitment. Like it's really hard for us. I mean, my kid is younger, so I know that comes with like, you know, my kid is younger, so I'm exhausted, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like we try to like watch things and like we were late to The Crown. Okay. It's like, I know it's like amazing and I would totally love it once it gets to the Diana part, but the like investment, I'm like, I can't do it. Like Gambit, perfect. Like 8 episodes. Boom.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there aren't that many shows like this anymore. You know, there aren't too many Grey's Anatomies out there where it just keeps going. Forever and ever. And if you're going to get into it, you need to make a commitment for like 800 episodes.
Hell no.
Grey's Anatomy anymore. I broke up with it.
You have to.
I did.
I never got into it.
I don't know. I don't understand. My sister-in-law, if she's watching this, my sister-in-law or listening to it, my sister-in-law absolutely still watches it, and I give her such props. I'm like, good for you.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, is that still on the air?
Exactly.
Yeah. Right?
Yes, really?
I don't even know.
There are no on a very special grade. They're all special.
They're all special. Well, yeah, okay. So let's loop back. So we're
go.
gonna talk about very special episodes, which was a phenomenon in like the 70s and 80s. I don't think it's
mid 80s, early 90s.
Maybe into the early 90s. I know there were some very special episodes of like All in the Family and Maude and stuff that you get into the 70s, but it was a huge deal. Like every season of every sitcom had a very special episode where they dealt with some kind of sensitive thing, some kind of maybe even scandalous topic.
Or at the time, it's sensitive topic.
Right.
Yes.
Where and a lot of these, like if we were to watch it now, it would be like, why you got the kid gloves on, you know?
Let me preface also by saying like, and I don't mean to like toot my own horn here, but I was a film and television major at university.
That's
well,
I did my thesis on All in the Family, and it's important to know that in the 80s and 90s, these very special episodes were happening during family hour. So they were like family centered, like
right,
very special episodes. Whereas like the 70s, I feel like it was like not so much primetime family hour. Like, so it was like
sure,
talking about a little bit more like All in the Family was more political.
Right. And I think this is actually a really, really good point of reference is look at how much television, and I mean, we can't even really call it television anymore, but like look at how much entertainment has changed. So things have gone from when broadcast was king to you had your programming slots, and Tuesday night 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. was like for a while that was super prime time. And I mean, it would shift around. It would become Thursday night, or
remember TGIF,
right?
Oh, yeah,
and then
TGIF, yeah.
And then ABC came around with TGIF, so all of their family-friendly programming was one big, massive block.
Full House and Perfect Strangers, and
Family Matters.
Family Matters is
Yep. And there were a couple others that came and went that didn't last. There was some show with Heather Locklear in there, and what was that?
Golden Girls was on there, or something. Golden Girls was on.
Yeah.
It was like a block because they were half hours. So it was like Full House, but the last half hour was a little bit racier.
Because the last half hour came on at like 9:30, right? And so they would get a little racy. But it's interesting because I did go back. I watched some of these episodes because I remember. I mean, it's funny because Edgar doesn't remember these things at all,
which blows my mind because I have vivid memories of watching them.
It was a phenomenon. I mean, it was
remembering the commercial tonight on a very special Blossom.
Yeah,
really.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I don't even remember the commercials.
Next week on a very special Blossom. Next week on a very special Family Ties. And I mean, they would have like, because I would notice it. I don't know if most people would, but they would always do those promos for next week on Family Ties. Yeah. And then they would bring in a different voice actor with like the movie phone guy's voice next week on a very special episode. Yes. So that you knew it was going to be serious.
The tone totally changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then like, which ones are you thinking like of, Dan, in particular?
Okay.
So for me, the first, I remember like all of them because for some reason it was just such a big deal when one of these would come on. I felt almost like obligated to watch it.
Back up. How old are you?
42.
Okay. And I'm 41. Okay. So we're the same. Okay.
I wonder if it has something to do with age because I'm older than you.
I am wondering.
And you're only 3 years older.
I'm 45. Yeah.
Okay. But were you watching Full House?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
I watched
Then I
Full
know
House.
why you're not remembering.
Yeah, I just
So-
don't. I mean, I
But
remember the only one I remember like this is the Dudley episode that
Yeah, and that's the one I was going to go to.
Are you
First,
talking about,
is
what are you talking about, the bike store?
the bike shop episode of Diff'rent Strokes.
You said
Yes.
one word, Dudley.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
We did
exactly.
not talk about this before.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that episode, and everybody remembers, it's the episode where Dudley gets molested on Diff'rent Strokes, and I feel like that's probably like the highest profile one of these, because somebody got molested, like
that's
which for the 1980s, it didn't happen on camera, right? But like for the 1980s, that's some pretty heavy duty stuff to put on TV.
Now, of all the things, that's the only one I remember, and that's the one that really kind of scares the crap out of me when I was a kid. When I was a kid and I heard that someone did something to that kid, I was just like, what?
Interesting, because what scares me is the Webster one. Do you guys remember the show Webster?
I remember Webster.
I remember Webster, sure.
Number one, beat the chick hicks.
Holy canoodles.
We have a new race winner. Is that what happened?
My race was going to be Lightning McQueen.
Okay. Webster, there was a fire.
Yeah, Webster burned down the house. He burned down the house. Or well, actually, they were living in an apartment, but he burned it down.
We're house hunting, and we got sent a listing, and the listing had a dumbwaiter elevator.
Oh, really?
And I was like, oh, hell no.
Because
Webster
we'll
burned
burn
down
the house down.
Oh my God.
So I had read, and I don't know how true this is, but I had read the whole reason that they shot that episode was because they wanted the family to move out of that apartment into a single family home, because it's easier to shoot that. It's easier to get exterior shots.
I thought it was just because, fire safety and,
I almost hope the whole motivation.
How he burned the house down?
What?
You remember how he burned the house down?
Oh gosh. No, actually I don't.
Got a science kit as a present. And he did
A chemistry set, like a chemistry set? And he
he
made an explosion.
I watched that show. I don't remember Webster too well. I don't remember Punky Brewster too well. The one I remember well is Give Me a Break.
Oh, I loved Give Me a Break with Nell Carter.
With Nell Carter. She was awesome.
Give Me a Break. I'm sure there were some very special episodes of Give Me a Break. I just don't remember them.
I don't remember them either.
But that show dealt with a lot of issues. That I think that show was definitely on the racier side of things, especially for the 80s. But I feel like the whole concept of the very special episode informed the whole genre of sitcoms after it, because sitcoms got a lot more serious on an episode to episode basis in the 90s.
Yeah, I think Full House, there were certain episodes that I don't know that they were considered very there was a very special episode, DJ and drunk driving. But there were other special episodes that weren't dubbed special, but they were I'm thinking of when they addressed that her mother died, or
right. Yeah.
They address certain things were happening, for girls, she gets her period, it wasn't a special episode, but they were adult themes.
Yeah.
That were centered around the family, so you could talk about it in a safe way.
Right. And so we have the Dudley Gets Molested episode, which was, it's rough.
It is rough.
It was jarring.
And then there's another Diff'rent Strokes very special episode where it's so silly. You go and watch the episode, and especially as an adult, I'm watching this episode and I'm like, none of this even resembles reality. There's an episode where Arnold decides he's going to be an investigative reporter for the school newspaper. And this is grade school, mind you. This is 6th grade. right? He decides he's going to be an investigative reporter for the school newspaper, and he catches wind of this story about drug dealing, like drugs being dealt in the school. And he sets up a meeting with the drug dealer.
I know what you're talking about.
And
Get outta here.
the drug dealer is another kid,
Yes,
another kid in the class,
hallway,
and he's
right in the hallway.
or the playground. It was in the playground behind the school, right? And the kid is selling pills. I'm assuming, he's selling like his parents' pills, basically. And then Nancy Reagan comes to the class and gives a speech about how bad drugs are.
Well, it was,
and the whole thing is disingenuous because, like you look into Nancy Reagan, she was no teetotaler. Anyway, but it's one of those things where, like, I can go back and watch the Dudley very special episode
and still be kind of creeped out.
And be kind of creeped out and be like, it's not poorly done, let's say.
No.
Right? And you go back and you watch the Nancy Reagan episode of Diff'rent Strokes, and it's just like, has nobody on this show bought drugs, been around drugs, or done drugs? Because none of this rings true to reality.
Did Diff'rent Strokes start it then? Did Diff'rent Strokes start the very special episode, or did All in the Family start?
I think it was All in the Family.
All in the Family had a lot of firsts. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it was All in the Family where
All in the Family.
I think there was an episode where Edith almost gets raped. Right.
Oh, that's a bad episode.
Yeah.
What?
And that.
Well, I can't.
Yeah.
That was a two-parter.
I did not watch All in the Family. I'm wondering maybe if my parents kept me from watching these these very special episodes.
It's possible.
I don't remember any of these.
All in the Family had also just crazy first. They were the first TV to ever have the sound of a toilet flushing.
Right.
Are you kidding?
Yep. And All in the Family, the whole point of that show was to make a family sitcom that was provocative and stepped every episode was written to step outside of the boundaries of the comfort zone of TV and done through the context of the traditional TV sitcom about a family.
I feel like you're right. They started without saying it's a episode. They started.
Right. Yeah. All in the Family is kind of a work of art.
Oh, it's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece.
But I think realistic that episode where Edith almost gets raped is probably the first very special episode. And then you get into these 80s there's the Family Ties episode. Actually, there are two Family Ties very, very special episodes.
Oh yeah.
But there's the episode of Family Ties where Tom Hanks plays what is it, Uncle Ned?
I think it is
Uncle Ned.
Yeah.
Family Ties. And Michael Keaton.
Yeah. So Family Ties is Michael Keaton. Tom Hanks is in a guest stars in an episode. He plays Uncle Ned, who's a drunk, and he's an alcoholic, and at some point he gets drunk and he punches Alex right in the face. And that was definitely one of the very special episodes. And that's one of the episodes where, it got a little bit melodramatic, but it wasn't weird and over the top. A lot of these very special episodes are weird and over the top.
Which one wasn't weird or over the top is, and I don't know if you'll remember this. It's the Seavers. Now
Growing Pains.
Growing Pains, yes.
And the daughter is dating Chandler. What's his name?
Matthew Perry.
Matthew Perry, yeah.
His name is Sandy. They're so in love, and he's gonna pick her up on a date. And he had a few beers and he was in a car accident and he's in the hospital. And she hears that he was and it's all about drunk driving, and it's subtle and not over the top, and scared the living shit out of me.
Wow.
Oh, wow. I'm starting to remember that one because I was a Growing Pains junkie.
Okay. And it's you don't even expect it until the last 2 minutes of the episode where she's just waiting to get picked up by Sandy. And her dad is that was the hospital. That was Sandy's mom. Sandy's been in a car accident. He was drunk driving, and like all about how she could have been in the car with him, and like, I mean, it's like very, but it was like just the last 2 minutes of the episode. The whole rest of the episode is just
a regular episode.
Just a regular episode.
That's
but it stuck with me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's good storytelling, right? You don't have to like slam the people in the face with it. You can just slide it in there and make them know.
Because
I'm gonna look that one up
because when it's ham-fisted and ham-handed and beating you over the face with it for half an hour, how are you supposed to take it seriously?
Yeah.
Maybe
that's why I don't remember these, because I don't remember any of these. I know I didn't see that episode. I think I would have remembered it.
This is crazy. I just looked it up.
What episode was season?
Sandy. Yeah. Just saying that, he's.
It's just the name of the episode, Sandy.
It was deep into the season.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's 1989.
Wow. Okay.
So it was early 90s. Early 90s.
Some of these episodes, when I look back at it makes me wonder, what the hell happened in between the early 90s and now, that I'm looking at some of these very special episodes, and they're all about stuff that we're still fighting over whether it's a problem or not. like Family Matters. There's an episode called Good Cop, Bad Cop, where Eddie Winslow, who's the son, the teenage son.
You're talking about, and then he goes to the diner where they're eating.
And he gets arrested for being black.
Yeah, in the wrong neighborhood.
And that's what the whole episode is about, that he gets arrested for being a black kid in a white neighborhood. Nothing else. It's an episode about racial profiling. And that was like 1994. And I mean, we still have, we basically are fighting a civil war right now about whether or not racism even exists,
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. It wasn't a sitcom by any means, but 90210.
Mm-hmm.
And the episode when David's best friend shoots himself by accident.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, am I blowing your mind right now? But what are we talking about all the time? Gun control. And that kid just, he loved the wild, he loved guns, and he saw his dad, and he just wanted to show his, David his gun. And he remember that was very special. 90210. Somebody's going to die. Everybody knew it.
Yeah. Right. Oh, big
wasn't
deal.
A sitcom,
but yeah. I mean,
it was centered around the Walshes and the family, and that you
could
watch it with your parents and you wouldn't get embarrassed.
Right. Sure. It's kind of taking the teenage themes, the coming of age themes, and putting sometimes you have to deal with the real world as an adult theme. Yeah. Yep. And it's I guess the more you think the world is changing, the more you're just not paying attention to the things that aren't changing anymore, it feels like. Because you pick any one of these very special episodes, any one of them, and they may not be scandalous to put it on TV anymore, but the issues are still there.
There's drunk driving, gun control, racial
drugs, and racism. That was the other very special. Well, I think every season of every show had its own very special episode. It's just some of them are more memorable than others. But there's another Family Ties episode where one of the dad's co-workers basically sexually assaults Mallory.
What?
Oh yeah.
That show got dark sometimes.
Yeah, it did. That show had some very real moments. But so this episode, Edgar, because you look perplexed.
Well, it's just like, I'm just wondering what was I doing during these years, because I don't remember any of these episodes that you guys are talking about, and I'm also wondering like what what could have influenced all this TV? Like, why? I mean, aside from just entertainment,
I think the times did.
but I mean, the
I
times are
think-
even worse now than I don't want to say they're worse now, but I mean, we're more aware of these kind of issues now. Like you guys.
Well, and I think that's
point of it,
I
but it's
think
just like,
that's
why?
that's what the point of all of it was with these episodes. TV was evolving into a place where people didn't want to see the Brady Bunch anymore. You know, they didn't want to see. They didn't want to see I Love Lucy. They still wanted to see the idealized version of the American family.
The problem still wrapped up by the end. The
right, yeah.
drunk uncle went to get help at the end.
Right. There was usually a happy ending or a reasonable resolution,
right,
to all of these episodes. But I think people wanted to push the boundaries of, can we bring a little bit more realism into the pabulum that we're making, you know? Mm-hmm. And especially like in the 80s, America was going through a really conservative swing. You know, the Reagan America was very, very much, we're going to do our best to pretend that 1950s sitcoms were a reflection of reality, and we're going to try to enforce that reality on the American consciousness, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there was a lot of, you know, none of us are that naive, and we want to see some reality because we're living in a world of new challenges and new realities, and we can't pretend they're not real. So I think that's where the very special episodes came from, because you were never allowed to do too much that was provocative in TV before like the late 70s.
Well, one of the things that bothers me with like the Reagan era, especially with, in particular, the fact that you bring up that Nancy Reagan was in that episode of Diff'rent Strokes, is the fact that they started the whole war on drugs. Yeah. And the damage it's done to the Black population of the United States is immense. And then they did this episode where the cast is Black on the show, and she's telling them that drugs are bad, right? Yeah, right. It's just it's kind of it does something to me where it's just like, okay, what is going on here? It's almost like you're shooting a warning shot, saying, okay, we're coming after you, all right, just so you know. And we're going to hit all the people that look like you, because they're basically warning people of color, you know? And it's just like,
they weren't the best with that stuff. Yeah. I mean, hey, she was against, you know, stem cell research until her husband got Alzheimer's, and then she was like, oh, stem cell research. You know?
Oh man.
Yeah. There's anybody who's listening, go ahead and listen to the Ronald Reagan. It's 2-part episode of The Dollop. Find the Ronald Reagan episode of The Dollop. It's worth listening to, especially if you have like a romanticized idea of the Reagans and Reagan's America in your mind. It's worth listening to that episode.
I don't know a lot, but I do know that like during that time on TV, it was AIDS and hair, hair, and you know what I mean? Like,
yep.
Crazy music. It was the 80s, late 80s. That's a crazy ass time.
It was a crazy time. There was a lot going on, and you know, there was no. Well, we're not going to devolve into a political episode here. We're not going to do it.
It's not politics.
No, I was about to go down that road, and I stopped myself. But, you know, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on in the 80s, especially as you got to the late 80s. A lot of things coming to boil.
They couldn't ignore it in these.
Right.
They couldn't ignore.
There was
very special AIDS episodes. Absolutely.
Yeah, there was a very special AIDS episode on Mr. Belvedere. Wesley's friend got AIDS through a blood transfusion.
On Mr. Belvedere?
On Mr. Belvedere,
I remember that episode.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
Because Ryan White had,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or maybe we were all aware of Ryan White.
We were all aware of.
I think we were all aware.
Yep. Ryan White was a cultural phenomenon because
Well,
it was.
he got from a blood transfusion, correct?
Yeah,
Like the first face of like, hey.
It's not just the quote unquote people who you don't want to admit exist. This is a real disease that affects everybody, you know.
I believe that I would register a guess that almost every major network television had some kind of relation to Ryan White, the AIDS quilt.
Yep.
Could have been in it. I mean, that was when Michael Jackson was singing about him.
Yep.
The AIDS quilt? What's the AIDS quilt?
What?
I don't know what you're talking about. You said AIDS quilt.
Are you sure you lived through the 80s?
I mean, yeah. Are you? How old are you?
I'm 45, but I've never heard of the AIDS quilt.
Dude, it made the rounds.
What? I have no idea. What is it?
I believe, though I could be wrong, that when I walked for hunger in like 1991, I signed a patchwork that was going on the AIDS quilt.
Never heard of it.
It was a quilt that was constructed by people from all over the United States, and they would make patches for people who had died of AIDS, or you know, a Girl Scout troop would like make a patch that said like, I don't know, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, and so, it was enormous. This quilt. And so like people would contribute sections of the quilt,
and they stretched over the mall, didn't they?
They stretched it over the mall outside of the like the reflecting pool, I think.
What mall?
In Washington D.C.
I have vivid memories of like seeing.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Let me ask you this, Edgar, because this is how I define, in my mind, this is the definition of somebody who grew up in the 80s. Were you so terrified of having sex because you were convinced that the first time you had sex, you were going to get AIDS and die?
Of course.
Okay.
I was
so
afraid
you grew up in the 80s.
I grew up in the 80s. I was worried. There was a few things I was worried about. I was worried about getting AIDS. I was worried about getting locked up. I was worried about getting shot by gangbangers.
So you were a walking, talking, very special episode.
Very much. So I was living it. Maybe that's why I wasn't paying attention to it.
Maybe.
But like, yeah. So like, because one of the things, I mean, I grew up on the southwest side of Chicago in an area called Little Village.
Hey, Little Village was rough, man. In the 80s, especially.
It was, but it was just like.
Tell me about Little Village, actually, because I have my own preconceptions about it.
So this is, and you can kind of jump in as I say this, but like my experience growing up in Little Village was that primarily Mexican, people of Mexican descent in that area. If there are other people, there's very few other people. Some other people from other Latin populations might be in there, like Colombians, Cubans, etc., but mostly Mexican. And in Little Village, you could almost say that a majority might be from an area called Durango or whatever. Doesn't matter. But my experience growing up was like, I didn't want to get bit by a dog. I didn't want to get AIDS. I didn't want to get locked up because one of the things too is it's like, all right, and I didn't want to get shot by gangbangers because I mean we saw a lot of both. We saw a lot of cops and you saw a lot of gangbangers, right?
I didn't want to get kidnapped. That was a big one for me.
Kidnapped?
Really?
That makes sense. I mean, because you're a woman, right? That was not a concern for me.
A suburban white kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I felt like there were a lot. We had, did you ever have passwords growing up, like to like pick you up from like school?
Nope. They just picked us up. In fact, I would walk home from school.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was
and
like,
I was a city kid.
If your mom couldn't pick you up, or if your dad couldn't pick you up, like, don't trust anybody. They should know your password. So like if my mom had a friend pick me up from school, the friend had to be like, hey, Leah, I'm here to pick you up from school. The password is,
Oh,
karate.
wow. Yeah, I never had that.
Never
Yeah.
had that. Yeah.
And I think because we had that, I was scared of being kidnapped.
Oh, sure.
Mm.
You know,
Because it put it in my head.
being overly protectionist with your kids is going to turn them into paranoids. You know,
Well,
it's-
here's-
Well, that's
well-
what happened with the hippies.
Well, here's
Sure,
the,
yeah.
here's the problem with that.
well, no, the hippies turned into Reaganites.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, here's the problem with this situation, right? Like, okay, so you're saying maybe we shouldn't have passwords, maybe we should, but like the thing is now, and stories like this, right? My my niece, one of her friends in school almost got kidnapped when she was
it's a very
little.
real thing.
It's a very real thing, and it's what is the likelihood of that happening? I don't know. Like, I don't know, like maybe 1,000,000 to 1. Who knows? But this guy was crazy. Like, this guy rolled up on the school, and as the kids were coming out of school, he jumped out of his van and attempted to like kidnap a kid right off the sidewalk. Okay. Like in front of people, in front of other adults. Like he was not well, right?
Mhm.
I guess I can't remember, he didn't get a kid, basically,
which is good.
thankfully, right? He did not get what he wanted, but like he jumped out of the car, scared a bunch of people basically, but nabbed the kid and tried to drag the kid into the vehicle, but was stopped, right, somehow. And then he tried to get away, and then I think 3 or 4 blocks down or something, the cops actually caught him, what have you. But like there were enough people there to kind of stop the man from actually kidnapping anybody. Yeah. And the problem is this, like, okay, so what do we do? Do we make all our kids live in fear like this, like with the password and stuff? Or do we not do it and then actually be at risk for this thing to happen? It's like insurance. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to buy insurance in case you get hurt. But what if you don't ever get hurt? Do you ever get that money back? Like you're never going to get that peace of mind back,
No.
All right. And you're right. And I'm scared.
Nuts.
Scared of this one. I'm always like,
Oh, sure. Although honestly, I feel like growing up in a city is better for kids than growing up in the suburbs or growing up rurally. I think it makes you a little bit more aware out of necessity. You're just by necessity, based on your surroundings. You're just more aware.
And, even weird stuff like that, like you're taught at a very early age in the city, like about the alleys and about stopping.
Right.
Whereas like if you live on a cul-de-sac and you're running across the street, to a friend's house.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I'm as somebody who lives in the suburbs, but somebody who grew up in the city, I feel like there are a lot of things that I see in my own boy that are kind of missing. There's a certain reality that he's been sheltered from.
Yeah.
And to be fair, he could live the entire rest of his life and never have to confront those realities unless he decides to go and live in the city.
It would be okay. I mean, it would be okay. I mean, he'd be fine.
Although there is a Diff'rent Strokes coming up again. There's a Diff'rent Strokes episode where Sam gets kidnapped.
Yes.
And it's a bizarre episode because Sam gets kidnapped by some guy who lost his own son, and like the son died.
Uh-huh.
And the guy kidnaps Sam, brings him home, tells his wife that Sam was a homeless kid he found living in a box and they were going to adopt him. And they kept him for like a week.
You gonna take a shower? All right. Thanks for the update.
So I just see, like, one of the things that I learned, because I'm paranoid, and one of the reasons it's one of the reasons that I've taken martial arts my whole life is because I'm paranoid. Mm-hmm. But one of the things you learn is that the likelihood of a kid getting kidnapped is not very likely. The person that's going to kidnap a kid is most likely someone that knows the kid, somebody who's a family member.
Right.
And the highest possibility of the person, the kidnapper being is like a dad or a mother from like a separated situation.
Right. And
so like, didn't he like know like the family or something?
no.
You see, so like that scenario,
Unless I'm remembering it wrong. I don't think so.
So that scenario is highly unlikely, except with the latest surge in child trafficking or like
right. Yeah.
Like I don't understand.
It's also go ahead.
I see, like I don't know all the specifics about that. It's relatively new to me, so I don't have like facts and figures in my head. But I know that it's happening and it's fairly high. But they usually prey on homeless people. So like the girls and boys that they kidnap are usually like kids that are living on the street to begin with.
And I mean, man, it's easy to go down that road where you start seeing threats everywhere now because news is so accessible. There's always, and everything is sensationalized. And every time there's some kind of high profile case about a missing kid or something like that, it's splashed all over the news, all over the country, all over the world. But the reality is, and I mean, you can look into the FBI crime statistics if you want, I'm not going to bother preaching numbers at you, but like the reality is we're living in a world where it's literally never been safer for kids because there are cameras everywhere and everybody has a phone. And like the reality is that like the safest time in the history of the world to be a kid is right now. But it just doesn't feel that way.
It doesn't
right now either because they're all wearing masks, and so I haven't had to wipe out, snot over a year. So that's
right.
Bro,
I think that whole abduction craze thing started in the mid 80s. It started with some particular girl. I forgot. I can't remember the name of the situation. Was it John Bonet?
Well, yeah, maybe. I don't know.
No,
but that was like in the early 90s.
No, it was a little further back. I can't remember. I'll have to look it up, but
there was like a movie of the week. There was a constant stream of
that's a
made
whole
for TV.
Thing. I mean, movies of the week. I mean, those concentrated on
just the worst ideas that you could have.
And what was going on? Like what
Yeah. They would churn them out like
they were
in like 4 days, And
they were kind of scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But there was a period of time there where like there was a movie of the week every week about some kid getting kidnapped.
Or a cheerleader getting hazed or murdered or
there's one I remember really specifically. It's called I Know My Name Is David.
My Name Is David. Oh my God.
I've never heard
of it. You remember it? Yeah. And it's about a kid who got kidnapped and was held by the kidnappers for years. And the only thing he knew, like when he finally got rescued,
I cannot.
The only thing I know my name is David.
I'm so nervous.
So hold on. So tell me more about this movie because, of course, I don't remember it. So when was it released? Like who?
Oh my God! Come on!
No. I want to know.
I'll get on the Google.
No, I just want to know, like when was it? Is it based on a real story? Like what are the details?
I Know My Name Is Steven.
Oh, it's Steven.
There you go. Sorry, Steven.
I Know My Name Is Steven, and it was.
Oh my God! And there's the promo picture of it, and that is etched into my memory, and it's just
the picture. That's exactly what I thought.
Oh my God! Let's see. I guess it is based on a real story.
It's a real story. Yep. Yeah.
Was Steven Stainer?
Yep.
Was abducted in 1972.
Jesus Christ.
And held at the age of 7 and held until he was 14.
14?
Wow. Yeah. So he was held for 7 years. And like I don't know the actual story. I just remember that miniseries, and it's just like at the end of it, he's like, I know my name is Steven. And that's like it. That's all he knew. And but like that was a theme. There were so many shows about like kids getting abducted.
Totally.
There was one, I don't remember the name of it, but it made me so distraught. I can't believe my parents let me watch it, but it was about some kid who like his parents get divorced. The dad abducts him, runs away with him, and then sets him on fire.
What?
I don't know, but dude, think about it. I just had this thought. Think about it. What's the movie? Kindergarten Cop. Kindergarten Cop
Is
and
about a kidnapping.
you're like, it's going along. It's a great movie. This is a great movie, great movie. And then all of a sudden, it is dark. They have set that on fire, and he is trying to get his kid. It is scary as
that movie flips the script from being
on a dime too,
like,
on
instantly,
a dime,
uncomfortably. Like
yes.
it flips the script from being this really kind of chill and
this time,
family friendly, you know,
they're
almost comedy, right?
You know, like
yeah. And then like the third act of that movie, it's not gradual. It just flips and it's dark.
And the grandma's in on
it. Yeah.
Kill the kid, and it's scary.
Yeah.
That was that time.
That was the mentality of it. Oh man. So we're very special episodes a good thing in the long run, do you think?
Well, I think it was.
I think they were just the traumatization of America.
I digress, because I do think that they were a good thing in the long run. But it is interesting to think about that stuff now and how raw it was.
Yeah. I think, it's hard for me to say that they were a good thing in terms of bringing more awareness about things. I don't know that they really did that. But what I will say is they set the path for more sophisticated television and better storytelling.
100%.
Because, 100%. I mean, TV has gotten, TV shows, sitcoms in particular, just got so much more sophisticated and so much more realistic, and the things that people went through just without having those special episodes anymore, just written into the storytelling.
Character arcs got much more complex, and like backgrounds of characters got more complex, just right. I mean, full circle, but even talking about Grey's Anatomy, like think about Grey, like her mom had Alzheimer's, I believe. So that was
or dementia of some kind. Yeah.
That was like always like an underlying theme that like we don't really talk about, but like that does affect like a lot of people. And like all these just like real complex like character arcs now, because we had the special episode and had those special characters.
Yeah, right. We had a whole decade where there was always this special episode going on. Then it got to the point where it's like, okay, we don't need to shoehorn that into a special episode. We can just thematically introduce these things as part of the show. And it did lead to better TV. It led to better everything entertainment wise, because now introducing reality and high stakes wasn't something that you had to like pluck an episode out of the overarching series and make that special. Now you can weave that stuff in and make it just a regular everyday sort of situation.
Well, here's the problem I have with it though. And my problem with it is that it's the anxiety that it causes, right? I mean, it seems to have kind of left this kind of thought in our heads that we're worried about things that we should be worried about. I mean, like I said, the neighborhood I grew up in, it was in the inner city of Chicago. It wasn't, it's in the city of Chicago. It wasn't exactly Pleasantville, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I rode my bike everywhere. I there's a couple of times where my bike almost got stolen from me, but it didn't. There was one time that my bike got stolen, but I wasn't there.
Yeah.
So it was like stuff like that. Like I lived life. There was a couple of times I went to the grocery store. No, there's one time that I remember. One time, I shouldn't say a couple of times. One time, I went to the grocery store and somebody jumped out of an alley and shot down the street, right? And like with a silver pistol. I remember it like plain as day. Nobody was worried about these things. But now I don't let my kids, go outside by themselves. When I was a kid, I'd go outside and I didn't come back into the house till 10 o'clock. And that was on a school night,
Yeah.
Now on the weekend, they might let me stay out till about 10:30. I'm talking about little guy. I'm talking about 7 years old, 5 years. No, not 5, but 7, 8, 10 years old. I was out there hanging out with the other kids on the street. Right.
Mhm.
And nothing ever happened to me because
Right.
you
Yeah.
learn, you don't go that way. You don't go this way. You be careful with that guy
Sure.
over there. You be careful with that guy over there. If this happens here, you go around the other way. So like, I'm still worried about these things. I don't, even though I live in an area far from all this, right?
Mhm.
My kids are probably safer than I ever was growing up. But because I'm worried about these things that we're talking about, these topics, these possible awful things that could happen to us that were featured in these shows, I don't let my kids go outside by themselves.
Well, I mean, I
and-
don't think that's because of like sitcoms or special episodes.
No,
That might be part of it.
I think it is. I think it's part of it, but I don't think it's not the only reason. It's because we're inundated with all this information.
We're assaulted on a daily basis.
Assaulted is the perfect word.
Yes.
And so
Social media, fucking TV,
all of
everything.
these horrible stories about some kid getting kidnapped, or what was the kid? Oh God, it was news all year last year, and now I can't remember the names, but it's like his mom and stepdad killed him and his sister.
The Hawaii,
and then they ran off to Hawaii. It was in Idaho, and I mean, you're inundated with like this stuff makes the news, and now because of social media, it never gets out of the news, and so it's always right there in your head that this stuff is happening.
Like murder mystery podcasts and murder mystery.
We just did an episode about that.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we just did an episode. We just released it.
You'll have to listen to it. He
Yeah.
just posted it today. You should listen to it. You'll get a kick
terrible.
out of it.
I will listen tomorrow because I got thoughts on that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
Well, we can revisit it because we really liked doing that episode.
Well, I enjoyed it. I don't know if Dan did because Dan got all bent out of shape.
I got really worked up. I get very animated.
I mean, just for I was listening to this really good podcast called Long May They Run about like music festivals and fish. And it was like really
I thought you were a Dave Matthews fan.
I am, but like we all come from somewhere. And like, I came from fish. And like I was listening to it and I was like really into it. And like I was running and the podcast ended and it was like a 3-minute like teaser for their next 12.
Sure.
Whatever. And it was like they were alone in the woods. And I was like, Jesus. That's what I'm like, this is really scary. It was like a 3-minute, like all about this murder. And I'm like, who's listening to this?
Everybody.
I listen.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
And so like we're nervous about things because you can't escape them in media, in social media, in
Things
whatever.
Nervous about.
Hammered over your head that, it's a dark and brutal world and horrible things happen.
Yeah.
When the reality of it is, horrible things happen, but they're rarer and rarer every single year. Law enforcement gets better at preventing these things, or just, technology gets better at preventing things. But you never hear that side of the story. You just hear about the horrible, horrible things that happen.
The news got to make news, right? They need a story, right?
Yes.
So, but like, for example, one of my favorite shows before I had kids was Law and Order Svu.
Wow.
Once I had
part of the problem.
now that I have kids, I can't even get past.
Because it tugs at you, right?
Well, it makes me anxious.
Right.
It makes, because it's always a kidnapping situation, right? Or something awful like that.
SVU is always about sexual assault. Those SVU, and it's horrible. Like it's a fantastic show, and all the Law and Order shows are. But like from week to week, they're pitching just the worst possible crime that you could imagine happening.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's week after week after week after week of this, it's like, well, this must be happening all the time.
I think there's truth in that. And I think there's truth in coming back to those special episodes where, like, in the 80s, we were like, well, this must be happening all the time.
Mm.
These, this is real.
Yeah. I think it would be a lot healthier for all of us if we could think about it in terms of, instead of this must be happening all the time, thinking about it in terms of this must happen a lot more commonly than we may think of it, but it's still exceedingly rare.
And let's know about it and be educated.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I mean, culturally speaking, we're very sensationalized. Just the way we even think about things, just being part of the culture, is we think about things sensationally.
Yeah, I agree. We do.
It's just part of who we are. It's part of who America is. And I think
bigger, everything has to be better, everything has to be extra sized.
Yeah, everything has to slap you across the face and leave a red mark. Everything that's the only way that anything gets through.
Yeah, it's true. And maybe they thought that maybe they thought, well, we're going to have to slap people.
I wonder about it. It would actually be really fun to like get a hold of some of the producers or the writers from these very special episodes and just talk about it. Like, what was the thought process there? Because I'm willing to bet it wasn't, I'm sure some of it was sensationalization. Like, we're going to get eyeballs if we do this.
That would be amazing if we could get somebody like that.
Characters. How did they pick that? Like,
right.
PJ was going to be the one that, stole the beer from Uncle Jesse. How did they pick that? Like, it was going to be Sam that got,
And also, why was this the time? Like, why did you think, why was it all of a sudden like this was the time that you guys all of a sudden felt comfortable getting provocative? What was it? What spun those wheels?
Yeah.
What made those gears turn?
What was it? And what was going on in pop culture at that time?
And I think a lot of it comes back to, and I'm a little bit of a history buff on certain things, but a lot of it comes back to, in the 60s and the 70s were kind of this huge cultural swing.
Totally.
Where culture got more liberalized, let's say.
Totally.
And when I say liberalized, I don't mean in a political sense. I mean, people started to break out of certain norms.
Well, toilets were being flushed on TV.
Yeah.
It's not political. It's just, things became more real. They showed women and men in the same bed.
Yeah. Right.
They showed married couples sleeping in the same bed.
Yeah. I was just about to make that point, because in the 50s, they wouldn't do that.
No.
And I remember thinking, like, is that how they used to sleep together in back then? Like,
I remember thinking that too. Yeah.
Like, why would you, you don't hug on your wife while you go to sleep, or your wife hug on you? Like, it's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think there was just, I can't think of a different word for it. I don't want to use liberal. I don't want to use liberal or conservative. I really don't, because God help me. I don't.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of like social rights movements happening there during the 70s, right? I mean, you had the Chicano era. You had Black people were still fighting for rights. Everybody was trying to come to a place where they could have a life similar to everybody else on
I think going into the 80s, culturally speaking, there were a lot of Americans who were ready to be seen.
Yes.
That did not, women. I mean, it almost sounds ridiculous to say it, but I mean, women are still marginalized, but women were marginalized to the point of not even being considered full humans, like well into the 70s and 80s.
Well, I mean, All in the Family
Mhm.
that just through Gloria alone. I mean,
Right.
Gloria
Yeah.
wanting to work, Gloria wanting to work before she has a baby, Gloria having a baby, and why do you want to leave your baby? And I mean, that was very.
Some of the hardest things with the show is when we do like a retrospective, or like we look back on a show, because when we go back to that show, the way they treat women in anything past 2000, going back to past 2000, it's horrible. It's just like this is horrible how they speak about women, how they treat them. Like,
remember what was the show with Tool Man? Who's the Tool Man?
Tool Man Taylor,
Tim the Tool Man, Home Improvement. Yeah.
Home Improvement.
Even his wife in that show, and that was like mid 90s, late 90s. There's a whole episode on if she can go back to school.
Right.
Can you handle it, Tim? Can I go back to school? I mean, it's the mid 90s.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The whole thing about how, that's a lot to put on your man. And now if I was like, I'm going back to school, Michael would be like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and I think, so I think there was a lot of that culturally as we were heading into the 80s.
Absolutely.
And then there was this huge sort of pendulum swing back to, and I say quote unquote, because it's a fantasy, conservative American values or traditional American values. And there was like this huge swing back to that it was like the entire 80s. And I think there was definitely, let's say, a lot of fringy pushback to that, because, you had in the early 80s, you had punk music and you had heavy metal coming on big. And that was kind of reactionary to how soft and sedate certain parts of society wanted America to look.
Mallory really expressed a lot of that in Family Ties.
Yep.
What was her boyfriend's name? He had the earring and
God. Nick. The boyfriend was Nick.
Hey,
and
Nick,
he was older.
And he was older, and he had the earring, and he had the hair, and he didn't really have a job, and and that was like showing like this. Yeah. You can't control your kids kind of thing.
And Family Ties is a fun one to go back and watch. Number one, it's a good show. And even though a lot of it feels dated, the way that they treat the characters and the dialogue isn't really all that dated. But one of the things I do love about watching that show is the parents were hippies.
Yes.
They or ex-hippies. They were true on like love children.
Yes.
And then you had Alex, who was like a staunch Reagan Republican, and you had Mallory, who was kind of supposed to be this airhead teenage girl. And then you had, what was the teenage others? But what was her character's name? Jennifer. You had Jennifer, who was like smart. She was. Yeah.
And what?
She was the kid.
She was the kid.
Okay.
And then as she aged out, they brought another kid.
Right.
But so you had these interesting dynamics between the characters. But what I love going back on that show is watching. So the parents are supposed to be the 80s ideal of liberals.
Yes.
Except you watch Family Ties and you see them and you're like, so being a liberal in the 80s was being a Republican.
Basically.
Huh.
Because they are for being pitched out as being like former love children, they're super into like the traditional 2.5 children, mom stays at home kind of family model,
Starting to work again because the kids are older. Go back to work. But
right.
She didn't do that while she was raising them.
Right. It's kind of interesting. So like the idea of liberal in the 80s was basically conservative. Although, I mean, anymore, that's also true. Like, I mean, that's still true today. If you're liberal, I mean, our version of liberal is anywhere else's version of staunch conservative.
Totally.
But again, now I'm not trying to make value judgments. I'm not trying to make value statements. These are just observations, like what we consider. And I mean, I feel certain enough to say this, that I think that, you know, I feel like it's truthful. It's an accurate portrayal of our society. Our version of liberal is not very liberal.
Yeah.
So, Lia.
Yeah.
What episode did you bring? Like, did you look up?
I brought bits and pieces of all of them, so I've kind of been interjecting my.
Okay.
My main one was Webster.
Oh yeah.
Webster episode, because it had just had like an actual event in my life brought me to that episode. Like when I was looking at how,
because you were looking right,
and I instantly was like, absolutely not.
That's hilarious.
And so I thought that was really funny. So I was like, I'm gonna bring that to the pod, because that. Things that stick in your brain, like, you know, I can recite, you know, commercials from the 80s and 90s too. It's just useless in my brain.
Yeah, and it's never going away. It's never going anywhere.
No.
Instead of being able to speak a foreign language, you have an encyclopedic knowledge of McDonald's commercials from the 1980s.
There you go. So that's my excuse. I don't have the encyclopedic knowledge of old shows. I have a language.
Yeah, there. Now we know why.
And there you go. That's my reason. Okay.
I thought you were going to be like, now, Leo, when is your son coming in to disrupt this podcast?
It's been a while.
Yeah.
We've got I'd give us about 5 minutes until he starts to lose it, and I'm going to have to do that time.
Okay.
No worries.
Yeah.
But I think that's fair. I think we've
I'd give it 7 minutes tops. I can hear. But I do. I mean, I just think that, you know, those episodes almost shaped me. I mean, that's more what I was coming into it as, is like, look at the stuff that's stuck with us even to this day at 41, at 42, that we can remember the even feeling of that episode, the feeling of the drunk driving episodes, like that. It's still uncomfortable to talk about.
Yeah. And you'd watch those episodes as a kid, you'd be watching them and you would feel weird. You would feel like obligated to watch it, but you would feel like anxious and like, I don't want to watch it anymore.
Yeah, it was uncomfortable.
So I have to ask, when you guys were watching these episodes, were you guys watching it with your parents, or were you guys in the room by yourself?
Sometimes not. Sometimes my parents had better things to do.
My mom and I always watched Party of Five together.
Huh.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because she loved it, I loved it, and those were some deep issues going on.
Yeah, that was
more like a drama. TGIF, my parents, I feel, were in the room. I don't necessarily know if they were watching.
Huh. We would always watch Perfect Strangers. My parents and I Perfect Strangers and Night Court.
Night Court.
My parents loved Night Court.
Yeah.
I love Night Court.
My parents watched Cheers.
I remember Cheers.
We were not a Cheers household.
I'm trying to think what other ones my parents really liked. Like my parents watched Perfect Strangers.
And I don't think
Family Ties. My parents loved.
Well, yeah, and Growing Pains.
Growing Pains. My parents like.
It was like mandatory watching. Growing.
Yeah.
Pains. I don't think there was a very special episode of Perfect Strangers, though.
I don't think they did
I
that.
don't think
I
they
don't think
did.
there was a very special.
No. There was a lot of like weird kind of cultural thing going on there where because Belky, the guy who
Well,
played Belky,
Wasn't
And-
known.
And I
yeah.
think the reason why we loved that show so much was because, I mean, we had family like that. When there was in like 1984, a cousin, my mom's cousin, just showed up on the doorstep and hello, is me from Poland. I'm here to live, and
Oh shit.
I mean, this, it wasn't like, and so that the whole idea of that show, and I mean, that wasn't the only time that happened, right? There were a lot of people coming here from Poland in the 1980s to
There
escape
really were.
communism,
That's true.
Oh
That's-
wow.
And so like that show resonated with us in a lot of ways. Like it was definitely over the top,
Uh-huh.
but there were a lot of those kind of weird culture clash moments that they made fun of that really resonated.
It's also like interesting that like our parents didn't need to be in the room. Like now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, that was some pretty like, I can leave the room. My kids can be safe watching this programming.
Yeah.
I remember, you see, that's probably why it resonated with me. Cause I mean, that's me all the time. When I was growing up, I mean, we lived in a Mexican neighborhood, like, I mean, it's all these, everybody spoke at least 2 languages in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so like,
Down with that show.
Well, and that's, I grew up until the point at which I went to school. I started going to school. I spoke Polish and I understood Polish.
really? You
And
spoke
then-
Polish? You never told me this.
And then I started going to school and nobody spoke Polish at school. And so I kind of stopped doing it because I felt weird about it.
What?
Yeah.
You see, the funny thing about Mexican culture is if you don't speak Spanish, they make you feel weird about it. You're like, you're not Mexican enough. Like there's always a reason that they can make fun of you. And one of the things is like, oh, you have an accent. Oh, you have an accent too. You lived here most of your life too.
Funny.
But I mean, there's always this competition of who's more
authentic.
Who's more authentic? Yes. I'm like, you were born here. Who are you kidding? But you don't know that when you're a kid, right? But it's interesting that you say that about Perfect Strangers because I loved that show.
It was hard to not love.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Chicago.
And it was Chicago.
Was it Chicago too?
It was in Chicago, which was a novelty at the time. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I think that's why my parents, Cheers was a great show, but Cheers was Boston. Like, I'm sure that's why my parents watched it,
Sure.
Mm.
And I mean, I got into Cheers, but that wasn't until college. But watching
It's a great show, but I don't think there was ever a very special Cheers.
Nah, probably not.
I doubt it. But Cheers was like a super primetime show that wasn't family programming.
That was not family.
It was not the family sitcom.
There was sexual tension going on.
Right. It was a show about adults for adults. It wasn't.
It was about
right. We used to watch Dallas. My parents liked Dallas.
You watched Dallas?
First day of film school or TV film school.
Uh-huh.
They said, if you want to be in here, you got to know one thing. And they just lifted up the sheet, the whatever projector screen.
Oh yeah.
And it just said, "Who shot JR?"
Yeah.
The guy left. He's like, "Come back and let me know."
That was your film school? What?
That was like the first day of one of these.
That was the first day.
Like you got to know this. And you got to know why this is important.
What class was this?
It was like intro to TV.
Okay.
So let me ask you, why was it important?
Because it shook the world.
Okay.
Everybody wanted to know.
See,
I think Dallas. Well,
Dallas season, whatever.
Is it fair to say that Dallas was like the first primetime soap opera that took the world by storm?
Like Cliffhanger, maybe.
I mean, just like the series as a whole, though, that show was
I'm getting ready to get off.
owned the world. Oh, it's bedtime.
It's bedtime.
I was just telling him that we were wrapping it up.
All right.
All right.
Don't
Well,
worry. Yeah, okay, go ahead. I'm going to be in 5 minutes.
Well, I wanted you to come in if you want now.
Okay, 3 minutes.
why don't we let him wrap it up?
There you go.
You want to say?
One card from the day from past 20 minutes for my race. One card we do number 1.
Oh,
And he was number 4.
all right, I'll meet you in there. Go.
Well,
I'll be right back.
All right.
Oh,
All right.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
sorry.
No, it's
that's
totally,
awesome.
totally cool. I mean, when I have kids, I know what it's like. They've been coming in here. I'll be like, get out of here.
I was like, but do you know who shot JR?
I do not. Are you asking me, or are you just?
Yeah.
I do not. But I went to film school, but I didn't go to TV film. I went to just the film. So I don't know all the TV stuff. I just know the film stuff. I was in the animation department.
It was
So-
the sister-in-law. It was the
All right. Well, thanks. You know what? Before
It
we
was-
go,
It was Kristen, by the way.
yeah. This
yeah.
is
It was his sister-in-law who shot JR. Just so that everybody who's listening is not in suspense.
Okay, Leah. Well, you've been a wonderful guest. You got anything you want to plug?
I'm sorry that I'm momming right now.
No,
it's life. It's the way it is.
Makes everything better.
Yeah.
Good that you're
This
momming.
was fun. I love talking about this stuff.
Well, let's plug your stuff.
Yeah, let's do that.
And find me at Lia Berman 3, LIABERMAN 3 on Instagram. And I have a podcast. It's called the Parental Advisory Podcast with Lia Berman. And these guys were just on it. Their episode is coming out on Monday.
There you go.
Awesome.
We should also have this episode out by Monday. as
Yeah,
well.
I'm getting
There you
Yeah, we'll get a little cross-pollination.
excited about it. And it's a really good episode. I'm really excited about it.
go. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on here, Leah. You've been
Thank
great.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys.
And now go put that boy to bed.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for understanding.
No, totally cool. We're parents too.
I know. That's the best part.
Well, this is Edgar OtraVez. Thank you for being on the show roll. We'll catch you next time, guys.
Show roll.
No, the flow roll. I'll edit that. I'll just scratch it out and then fix that up.
All right.
Being on the flow roll podcast. We'll catch you next time.
That's awesome.
The title of the music you're listening to is Paradox by Raxi, and you can find it over at Epidemic Sound. Man, it was really enlightening, right? I mean, it was really good stuff. Really, they're just smart people here talking, and then me, the dummy, hanging out. But good stuff. Maybe I'll get smarter. Who knows? If you like what you heard from Lia Berman, you can find her over at Instagram as Lia Berman 3. LIABERMAN 3. Make sure you look for her podcast, Parental Advisory with Lia Berman, wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget my podcast. Make sure you comment, subscribe, like, press every button that you can find in a positive way for my podcast, wherever you get your podcasts at. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as The Flow Roll. Make sure you go to our website so you can find all our content and shop at our store. We have mugs, throw pillows, duvet covers, t-shirts, and so much more. Lia Berman, thank you for being on our show. You were great. I hope you can come back again soon. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time. Bye.